go to YouTube and you can subscribe to our podcast here, Two Guys in the Cloud, and our footprint grows ever further, Bob.
Oh, big reach now. Now people can see our ugly face. I think our listeners may go down after seeing us, unfortunately. We'll see what happens here.
I think you're right. Awesome. So, Dylan, welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you guys. And happy holidays to everybody as well.
Yes, yes. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Yes, I did. It was great. We just stayed at home with the family and twin boys, so it was fun.
That is, that's. I actually have to say that we're in that chapter where all of our kids are now adults, so it's taken on, kind of a new flavor Thanksgiving, which includes a little bit more liquor, and that's been, that's been fun. Actually, it's turned out to be really fun. It's a fun chapter, so it was good. All right, excellent. So, as I remember, I think we stumbled on 5G as a topic in a previous conversation. Then we thought, this is way bigger and we should commit some time to it. And I think that's why we're here. And I don't know if you naturally make this connection between, 5G and you bring up the cell phone and the cloud, but there's a tremendous connection, the more research you do. And I guess, Dylan, I'm hoping that you could frame it for us, and then we could use that as a springboard. But, why should we be thinking about the cloud if we're talking about 5G? And maybe what makes sense is to talk about what is 5G first and kind of get us there. Does that make sense? Can we do that?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I can go ahead and just start up with talking about what is 5G. And 5G, I think 5G is a big marketing term, obviously, like a lot of the stuff we focus on in this world. 5G is a lot of things. So 5G is basically there's kind of multiple flavors of 5G right now. There's low band 5G, which is kind of your typical cell phone tower that your phone connects to like in normal times, like LTE. That speed doesn't increase the speed much when you're talking about low band 5G. So it's pretty similar to what you get on the LTE plus networks today. It's a little faster. I've seen upwards of 250 megabits per second on those low band 5G networks, so that's pretty good. Then you kind of take a step up to the mid-band 5G. Right now, the actual only carrier in the US that has mid-band 5G is T-Mobile, and that will get you a little faster, to probably 500-600 megabits per second. Theoretically, it could go up to about a gigabit, but most people using that right now are seeing that 500-600 megabits per second, which is, pretty amazing when you think about it, even from that. And then you get to the millimeter wave 5G, which is really the big deal, I think. And that's the one that I think has political issues and stuff because, you have to be very close to the antennas. There's smaller antennas on poles. You have to be very close to them and make sure that, you get that connection. And when you walk, a couple hundred feet away, you're going to lose that connection if there's not another little antenna the next step you get to. So, and that's going to be huge. That's going to be, upwards. Right now, they're getting between 1 and 2 gigabits per second from that. But that's really the future, I think, especially in cities and non-residential areas where they go things. And I think that's going to open up the connection to, all the cloud providers, Amazon, Google, and and Azure, Microsoft Azure, to actually put some of the cloud connections in the cell provider, the telephony provider's location. So you basically, if you have an IoT device or autonomous vehicle, things like that, they're going to basically connect straight to that 5G network and then straight into that cloud provider's network for those services that they need. And I think that's the big connection there for the cloud. That's the huge leap that we're going to make over the next 5 or 10 years here with it.
So, that all makes sense. And what I, kind of gleaned from some of the research I was doing is, first and foremost, it's important to understand with the higher frequency, there's a correlation of bandwidth, right? So as you're talking about moving up in frequency, you're really what you're talking about is as I go up in frequency, I'm increasing the bandwidth that I can get through this, wireless channel, if you will, right? Yeah. And the first thing to understand is that that's not a small amount of bandwidth. It's a super significant amount. It's exponential amounts of bandwidth, right? So whatever we understand as bandwidth today, it's fractions of what it could be under 5G, right? So a true 5G as you get into that millimeter component. And then the other thing is that as we move up in frequency, as you're describing, it's not just about bandwidth, it's also about not dropping, right? And to your point, in order to ensure that you don't drop, you need more stations. And so when you get to these millimeter components, the true tremendous bandwidth, today we think about cell towers, and that's the way we go from cell tower to cell tower without dropping. But in order to support a real, true 5G environment, we need to think about, very, very, very tightly spaced cell stations, that would be very tightly connected. And so that's your political statement. How do you actually logistically pull that off from a real estate perspective? But if you do, then you're providing an environment of tremendous bandwidth. And then the other facet I thought I gleaned from it was that part of 5G isn't just about this tremendous bandwidth, but this incredibly low latency period. Yep. So that, there is no, in effect, there's no latency. It's like one, I forget the fraction. It's like a ridiculous fraction. And it's the kind of thing that could support things like autonomous cars, which is, that to me is where it clicked. It's sort of, okay, now I get it. I can have a safe autonomous car. Well, certainly I can't have a safe autonomous car if I drop. That scared me. Actually, when I read it, I'm like, oh my God, what happens if they drop? It's terrible. But like, to me, that was the first step I needed to really correlate between the frequency and the bandwidth. And then it was the cell towers, which I thought was fascinating in all of this.
Yep. So guys, do you think when we get to that millimeter speed, right, which may take, it sounds like 4 to 5 years, and probably it's going to be more major cities. But if we get there, are we going to have a need for home broadband any longer with that type of technology available, or will that be able to run all of our devices that we have in our home without needing broadband anymore?
Yeah, I think my opinion on that one is, and this is probably, some people will probably say you're crazy, but I actually think that, it might take 10 years to get here, but I think, eventually my thinking is that, basically you'll have a personal interconnection. You won't have a home broadband connection anymore. You won't have, routers and Wi-Fi access points in your house. You'll basically have a single device that connects to a 5G network that basically you'll walk into your office, say your home office, you'll pop that device down on the table or whatever. That'll connect your keyboard, monitor, mouse, whatever it is, and you'll start using that. That might be a touchscreen in the future, or even in your living room, you'll pop that down and it'll connect to your TV, probably wirelessly by that point, and you watch the movie or the TV show or streaming media that you want to do from there. And basically you become this just one little device that you carry around with you. It's probably be your phone or a piece of glass or something. Still, I don't think that's going away. I think a lot of people say, it's going to go to audio or glasses or something like that. I've never really believed that, but I have believed that there is, going to be a personal device that you basically does everything. Years, but I think in 10 years, that's my opinion. Might happen, might not. I don't know. We'll see, but that's kind of where my thinking is.
And wait till that device is physically embedded within you. Because I don't want to forget it.
That's right. Just put it in my neck and it'll be fine.
I think that's like, to me, this is one of the things I love about this business is, when you can start seeing these radical changes and then just trying to start to forecast what will it kind of look like, what will it, and like, for example, one of the things that they really focus on when you talk about this massive broadband that will come with 5G is the fact that it will enable Internet of Things devices to be able to communicate data back and forth between the cloud, massive amounts of data. Like today, we don't have the kind of data streams that come from these devices that we will have under a 5G environment. And then, the second part to that is the artificial intelligence that will be, that is in the cloud, right? Grabbing all that data, exponential amounts more of data than we have now, and then being able to, kind of massage that data in whatever way God knows, we have not figured that out yet. And then there's an outcome, right? And like, to me, that's the question. That's the dialogue. It's like, what is that going to look like? What are the devices that will really take advantage of it, or not even the devices, but the experience that'll take advantage of it using those devices and that AI. And to me, that's the new world. That's the frontier. Like, what does that conversation look like? And being creative enough to take advantage of it. Somebody will do something with that, and that to me is the fascinating part.
Yeah, definitely.
Some of the research that we did for this podcast is they were talking about doctorless surgeries in the future, or having a doctor, you're in Boston and having a doctor in California do a surgery with, automated surgical tools. And that is a little scary right there. I'm all for having the best in the world expert work on you, but I'm not sure about, he's having a bad day in LA or something like that, and you're in Boston having surgery. That is some futuristic stuff right there. But it's just really interesting things that can be done with true power of 5G. And what's interesting, and Dylan, to your point earlier, right? When the cell companies are advertising 5G, I've always considered it to be one thing, right? There's so many different levels of 5G. Yeah. It's almost like they should be called different things, because it's really misleading to me on the different levels of 5G. And once we get to that millimeter tier, that is going to be significant. So incredible stuff that could be developed out of this. And you're right, this really is the future. So exciting stuff. Yeah. I don't know about the surgery, so I got to hold on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that gets back to the latency thing. Like you don't want a doctor needing to wait or pause because of
That's right.
Yeah, but yeah, so interesting. So Dylan, what do you think in terms of, if you kind of put in the crystal ball, or if you look in the crystal ball, what do you think? I mean, what can we look forward to, or what do you think may come, from all of this?
I mean, I think it's a lot of things coming. I mean, like I said before, I think the user computing point is going to change a lot. And I mean, the good example was, you think of like what, you look at what the cloud providers are doing now, right? And we bring this back to the cloud providers, and, you think of Microsoft with Windows Virtual Desktop, or Amazon with Workspaces, or, I'm sure Google will come out of the cloud. They see the writing on the wall. I really truly think Microsoft, especially Microsoft and Amazon, sees the writing on the wall that computing is becoming a personal device. It's not, your end device. So if you look at a company like Apple, it was interesting to hear, I was listening to one of the podcasts that I listen to regularly, and they were talking about, Apple and Microsoft, and they were talking about, well, Apple and Microsoft really aren't competitors anymore. And if you really think about it, they are. Apple is making a end user device that is very personal to people, and Microsoft is focusing on the cloud, cloud services, the back, kind of the back end of all businesses running there. And if you look at the way things are moving, basically what's going to happen, in my opinion, is you're going to have this personal device, whether it's, an iPhone or what it is in the future, an Android device. It's probably going to be one of those flavors, because, people have to accept nowadays that Apple and Android are kind of the kings of the world when it comes to mobile, and that's where these things are going to come from. So you're going to have this personal computing device, and then you're going to connect to the cloud. You connect to your work. You're going to connect to the monitor. If there's still legacy applications around, then hopefully there isn't, but there probably will be, knowing what I know and what we do every day. Yeah. You'll connect then into some Windows Virtual Desktop or some cloud, compute to basically do most of those workloads that you run now, and most of those business applications. And businesses won't need to be sending out people laptops and sending out people things and giving them these devices, because these people will just be connecting from that one device over a 5G network. So that's kind of the world I see coming into play from the business side of things, and what we kind of do at Insight every day. But there's also a huge other world out there. There's the personal world, where there's the vehicles. We talked about autonomous cars, the latency there, in IoT devices, some people might call this, scary or things, but there's going to be, sensors and cameras and all these other things that are connected to 5G to basically amass that data into, mass data pools, that then basically analytics and AI will go through that and basically pull out the things and basically be able to analyze data at a much quicker level and get a lot more data to analyze. So we can, solve some of these issues that we have today. And I think, some people might say, yeah, that's Big Brother. And, I don't want this. I don't want cameras watching me. But when you think about like what we're going through right now, the pandemic, if these sensors can collect, and this might be scary to some people, but in my opinion, if we can use this for the good of people, collect, say, for example, collect people's temperatures, right? They collect temperatures and they can track that and they can actually pull that. And they say, okay, these people they can figure out, how much, without even testing for people for, some sort of disease or pandemic that we're going to in the future, they can amass how many people have it or how many people, guess, a better guess at what the infection rate is on those things and stuff like that. And yes, some of that is scary.
Yeah.
But
I love that infectious disease angle, the fact that we can, gather data at amplified rates, much more data, use that to create better. I mean, it's like anything else, there'll be better outcomes and there'll be less than ideal outcomes with this new, framework. Question for you. When again, in the research, one of the things that I gleaned from it was some impact to battery life, that there was this element of extended battery life tied to 5G, which I don't get. What's the angle on that?
So right now it's just because the 5G modems are so new that they basically, they're going to basically be connecting to that 5G and it's a lower frequency. They just haven't. So the chips that are running the 5G devices right now haven't caught up to the, it's just like any technology. It hasn't caught up and it basically just, that decreases the battery life on that thing. So, I mean, they're working on that. They're getting better on that. And there's going to be, like you look at the new iPhone, right? The perfect example is what Apple did is actually very smart. They built in something into their new iPhone where it's on by default. You can turn it off if you want to. But basically what it does is it looks at what you're doing on your phone. So if you're just streaming music or you're, listening to a podcast or something like that, it's actually and you're on battery, it's actually going to fall back to LTE right now. So it actually saves battery life there because it's not using that 5G signal that drains the battery. I mean, it's mainly just, that thing. So I think if right now in this world, I think if companies do stuff more like that, then the battery life isn't going to take a significant hit. Obviously, if you turn that off and you say 5G only, you can do that. Then, it's going to take a battery hit. But I mean, it's really just, the frequencies that we're using and then the technology and the chips that we're using just, cause a lot more power for the device to be used when you're on a 5G network. So, and that will change. So they'll fix it. They've already got better, in the past year or so. And so I think we'll be at equal battery life on 5G and LTE in about a year or two. And, eventually we'll get better and better,
Yeah, it's amazing in terms of, where there's always an Achilles heel. There's always this chain of events where there's the one component that's a little bit, is the Achilles heel for a period of time. And then it takes a quantum leap and then Murphy's Law, kicks in for something else. And, and it always seems to be around power, bandwidth, processing. It's like those three things. And they continue to iterate and evolve forward sort of fronts. It's really kind of amazing.
Yes, definitely.
One of the things that I found interesting in the research and something that I think is interesting but scary is the driverless vehicles, right? To me, that has been an incredible leap in technology. That's something I really thought I would never see in my lifetime. And the advances over the last 5 years in that industry is incredible, right? From where we've had to now, many of the new cars on the market have some type of driverless, setting. Obviously you need a driver there, but we're getting to the point where you won't have to have somebody in that driver's seat. And I can see in big cities, Manhattan, Chicago, all over the place, is that these become very, very common, and it's scary. I mean, I grew up in an age where you drove a vehicle and you were responsible for it, or we all are. And having a driverless vehicle is scary, but having that technology and having that 5G technology that can show, how close you are to a different car, or You have to pick another route and those kind of things. To me, from a safety standpoint, in my mind, make that much more applicable to doing something along those lines. Because right now it scares the hell out of me. But if we get to a point where that technology becomes super safe, then I think that is a real doable technology, and we'll see that more and more in big cities across. But having when the research I was doing that Elliott sent out was like being able to show how close you are to a different car, being able to be have those safety measures that 5G will enable is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because sorry, Elliot, you want to go?
No, shoot.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the big thing about 5G is that right now we have, all these cars like Tesla, and we've all heard about, some of these accidents that, some of these people have gotten into because they're not paying attention. Yes, the technology is not there yet, but the big difference that 5G is going to come is that all these cars are going to be connected to this network.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that changes things dramatically because this car, in front of, will know that this car and exactly how far apart they are. It will understand what this car is seeing. If there's an accident, up the chain a little bit, it will actually understand that, oh, wait, I need to slow down now. I need to know all this stuff. So it will actually, all these cars become smart at this point with 5G. For the latency that 5G has, it's going to basically change this picture dramatically because all these cars become connected into almost, you can think of it as like a big mesh network almost. And then basically they all communicate together and they know what's going to happen. So when you think about that, I mean, that's going to change the game of this, and it's going to make things much safer on the freeway. I mean, my opinion is, I know I argue with people with this all the time, is even now, I would trust a computer over a human driver, personally. Just because, I work with computers, and a lot of people wouldn't, but.
Yeah, if you drove with my kids, you'd really feel the same way. I mean, I agree with you.
But then adding that 5G flavor in there, where all these cars are actually connected and understand what's going on with each other, that even makes it, 1,000 times more safe than it is today.
Yeah, agreed. The and I just can't keep getting over the idea of like individually, if we all have that one universal device with us, that will add to that safety component too. In terms of cars being able to identify individuals and. Maybe even if there's an individual driving, if their health condition deteriorates, that has some effect on the car. I mean, you could kind of begin to model out all these different ways. One of the things that's been interesting to me with the, the pandemic has been, I think, this general migration from cities to the suburbs to rural areas. And I think a lot of it's been enabled by technology in the sense that, hey, I'm going to be working from home anyway. I can live wherever I want. There's a certain real estate benefit to living out in the, rural area or suburbs. I'll get more for my dollar. That's why I think we're seeing, I don't want to see a migration, but, people moving away from big cities like New York and Chicago and so forth. And actually, I love Chicago, and I was getting a little worried about the future of the city. And have been. But hearing this conversation, it almost helps me think in the other direction, in the sense that in order for 5G really, there needs to be a concentration of community, and there needs to be investment within that concentrated community in order to have those spots, those call spots that we keep calling, that won't work as well in a rural area and suburban areas. So it almost adds to the vision of the city. And I think that there's this really remarkable relationship between city, urban development, and technology that continues to sort of go back and forth. And this is just another example of it. It almost makes me think that there's an opportunity that in that direction, with the city as it relates to 5G somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think there are going to be, the cities are going to struggle a little bit with this pandemic because I think there's going to be a lot of office space that opens up. But I see this, changing that as well. I think, it's going to help, reinvest cities into some infrastructure that will help them, build what their next phase is. Yeah. I still see city centers as a center of business and a center of place, but I don't see it as what it was in the past. I see it, and this is always my opinion, I think the pandemic accelerated this, but I always thought in about 10 years in that time, we'd actually start seeing more people working remotely, more people working from home. Cities would have to change more of a central place. So, I mean, I still see businesses having smaller offices where they have to gather in-person meetings once we're out of this pandemic, and still people want to, have in-person meetings, have small places to work, get out of the home every now and then to actually do that. And I see that's where cities are going. So it's more going to be like a kind of a, I'm sure there'll still be a lot of people who want to live there. There's going to be some struggles with restaurants and bars, and obviously those things for a couple of years probably is my guess. But as we get in there, I think that's going to change. I also think I see where I'm going with this, getting back to 5G, is basically what I think is we get to this personal, we have this device. If you look at what a lot of people are doing during this pandemic, a lot of people decided, I'm working from home now, so I'm just going to go and fly to Hawaii for 6 months and live there and just work from there. I think it's a little crazy, but I know some people have done that.
I know. A wonderful idea. Jeez.
And I think, people probably have to bring, monitor, all this other stuff with them. If they could just walk into an Airbnb in the future and basically say, I'm going to work from here for the next couple of months, they can connect that one single device, get on the internet from 5G, and they're basically done. They don't have to think about that anymore, And that will change, I think, that dramatically. And I think that's where things were going anyways, in my opinion, with the cloud, with technology, where it's going. Pandemic obviously made people work from home more, made people work remotely. They're working from anywhere now almost. And basically this just opens up a whole new world for that, is that they can basically go anywhere they want to, as long as they have that 5G connection and that connection on a device, and they can work from anywhere. Companies, I think, are going to be more open to that now. And, I think definitely the next generation is, more that anyways. They don't do that. So going back to cities, I still think, these people, even if they lived in, the suburbs or rural areas, their companies are still going to have a central location in cities. They're still going to come to the cities at some point to work and do some stuff. They might, rent an Airbnb there for a month, or, so what I'm saying is cities are going to change dramatically, I think.
Yeah.
But, but it's going to be, more of a connected city. It's going to, have more features, and you're going to be able to, go to different places at all times. And, when you want to, especially that younger generation that's, come up in the workforce before they have what they really have on in one place.
Yeah. There's definitely, I think there's this sort of matrix between what does 5G enable and what would it enable within an urban environment. And that's the top right-hand quadrant, in terms of understanding what cities will look like in the future, is asking ourselves, what would 5G enable? Because it'll enable it first and foremost within cities. And whatever that is, it'll be that recreate. That's what the city will look like. That will be the recreation of the urban environment, which is, I think, a new conversation, and fascinating. But if we did, then we could maybe move to Hawaii and work from or play in Hawaii forever. That would be wonderful. Super.
That too. I think, I think the other thing that's going to come into play with this is, since millimeter wave is probably going to be obviously deployed in cities, that's mainly the only place it is right now, is in cities. It's very small radiuses of those cities as well. But when millimeter wave is, deployed to all these cities, it can open up like that. And get here, it can open up almost that future that we see in movies now, where, you live in a city, you don't really own a car at all anymore. Parking doesn't matter in the city anymore. You eventually call a car comes up to you, you get in, there's nobody driving it. And you put the location in, you go to the location. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Total recall. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's definitely going to be in the cities first, for sure, but, and that's going to be a big change in cities as well. It can open up more, I think, greeneries and parks and a better city living for people who actually live there at that point.
Yeah. It's a cool vision.
Dylan, how, from a technology standpoint, 5G is going to open a bunch of new doors for things we're not even thinking about right now that someone smart is going to bring to the table. How hard is it to develop, new applications for 5G and things along those lines? I go back to an analogy that I grew up in the Detroit area. To get new technology into you almost had to think 10 years in advance because it took so long to get just something ridiculous like a CD player into a net new car, right? So when you're talking about, this game-changing technology, how quickly could somebody, become the next Elon Musk or do something along those lines that drive, something brand new? What's it like is from a development standpoint and timeline?
I mean, it depends. It's hard. That's a hard question. It could go, any way, basically. I mean, someone could come up with an idea now and do that, but I don't think, the technology is really there yet to be able to do that. I think, we probably need. I mean, if someone came up with something now, I don't think it would really catch on for another 5 years or so, because if that whatever they develop needs that bandwidth and that technology to be there, that infrastructure needs to be put in place first. I think there's a lot of things that need to happen before that happens. I think, obviously we need to figure out rural areas a little better right now. I mean, rural areas still have, the cell coverage isn't good there. I think the government needs to actually entice these companies. Truly, they've had some enticements in the past, but they haven't really worked. They really have to push these companies to actually install the infrastructure in places that needs to be. Before we can even talk about, development of something. But I mean, if we're talking about cities only, and stuff like that, then, there's some infrastructure there now, but I think that really needs to be fixed before someone could even develop a game-changing kind of application or something for that.
Gotcha.
So, once that infrastructure is there, I mean, I think that could be pretty quick. I think if someone comes with an idea and they can implement that, and the devices are there, and the technology is there, and the infrastructure is there to lay it on top of, then, someone probably could become an Elon Musk really quickly. I mean, probably in the next 5 years or something, similar to that.
Right.
Although it took Elon Musk a bit of time to get where he is too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
He's got as much money as Gates now. I just read.
Yep.
My
he's
goodness.
he's the second. He's only under Bezos.
Wow.
I mean, I think to your point, Bob, some of this is where innovation takes place and what it attaches to. I mean, I think innovation, if it attaches to a very mature industry like the automobile industry, it takes time. If it's a net new, born in the cloud type concept, it probably takes less time. It depends on what it's attaching to. But I think that the infrastructure maturity conversation is real as well. Like the way I, as I was reading it, what I gathered from it is sort of part one is how many 5G phones are out there. And, in the United States, I think the number was something like 9%, by the end of the year. And that, maybe by the end of 2022, it's something like 46%. So you see this big leap, so that's sort of part of the equation. And then the other part is, the frequency, like the frequency level of the 5G, right? Earliest point, right now, I want to say it was AT&T that was calling their 5G, but it really wasn't 5G. It was really sort of an enhanced LTE kind of thing, which meant that, it was up a little bit on the frequency food chain, but it was nowhere near, what we're talking about in terms of true 5G, and it sounded like T-Mobile was furthest ahead in terms of their investment structure. But, it's sort of, at some point 5G becomes relatively realized, right? And maybe the millimeter number is not the first number to think about, but it's somewhere a little bit south of that. And who's going to get there first, right? And I don't know what that number is from a frequency perspective. I mean, where do you see the break point there, Dylan? In the sense that where's that frequency where, we're getting really close to 5G value here in terms of bandwidth and latency.
The actual frequency number, exactly.
I don't know. I'm guessing. Like today, if you look at frequency, it's at a certain number that's 4G or enhanced 5G, right? But somewhere between there and millimeter is another number where there is
band. That's the midband. The midband 5G.
Yeah, the sweet spot. They talked about that exactly right. The midband. What is that number? I
don't remember off the top of my head what it is actually. But we can talk about that later. I mean, so basically, the midband is, the bandwidth number is about 400 or 500 megabits. It can get up to a gigabit. I don't remember the actual frequency range that it uses. I think it's like, I want to say the 300 or 400 megahertz or 200 megahertz, but I can't remember exactly what that is.
But it's
looks like Bob might be looking that up, but
no, it's fine. And but you're talking about, when you talk about the megabits, that's the the bandwidth equivalent from that frequency, and that's when we're getting to real, maybe real functional value, a real functional leap from where we are today. And I guess I read that as thinking that we can get into that mid-band sweet spot within the next maybe year or two. Sort of the way I'm reading that. So somewhere between phone adoption, getting to about 50% by the end of 2021, and mid-band, capability by end of 21. We're maybe looking at a kind of a 5G-ish world in 2022. Like something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and they're all the three major providers are all doing this differently. Obviously, T-Mobile really benefited from that Sprint acquisition because they had all that mid-band frequency, and none of the other providers really had it. So T-Mobile has been able to roll out that mid-band frequency, and people are seeing on an average about 500 megabits per second. Maybe upwards of a gig, like I said. And then they're also rolling the low-band 5G to everybody, like AT&T has as well. So if you look at the really three providers, they have different ways of doing it. So you've got T-Mobile doing that with the mid-band and the low-band. They're only just now going to start rolling out millimeter wave. They have no millimeter wave at all. So they kind of looked at this a little differently, that the mid-band, which I can see, was more important to them because they can cover a pretty big, significant portion of the United States in that mid-band already with the Sprint acquisition, and get that rolled out, and then do millimeter wave, which was, obviously an up-and-coming technology. Then you got AT&T, who, has a lot of the shared spectrum with LTE and low band. So their low band basically covers the same amount of people as T-Mobile does right now. I know all the providers like to say, we cover more people with 5G than this company, but it's like, that's all marketing gimmick. They all about cover the same amount of people when it's talking about low band, because they're all really comparing low band when they talk about that.
Yes.
And then AT&T also has, what you said is they had their marketing term 5GE, which was really the enhanced LTE, which everybody has. They just called it 5GE, which was ridiculous. And they actually stopped. It's still labeled on phones, but they kind of stopped advertising that because they said, okay, they kind of cut a lot of slack for that and stopped advertising, thankfully. And then they have 5G, which is their low band 5G. And then they have 5G plus, what they call it. Everybody likes to have marketing terms, which is their millimeter wave. And they're deployed millimeter wave in, probably about, I think it's like 35 cities or 30 cities or so. And then you have Verizon, who kind of did the opposite of everybody else, is they deployed millimeter wave first. In only cities, they're in about 55 cities with a very small footprint in those cities. You have to remember that, yes, they're in 55 cities, but that city could only have one block that has millimeter wave support right now. So it's like, okay, you're in a city, you can go to this one block and you read some news articles from tech reporters, and they search out this block that has millimeter wave in these cities. So, and Verizon actually then went backwards, and then they deployed low band 5G, which was very recently, and they blanket about the same amount of people that AT&T T-Mobile do. Neither AT&T or Verizon right now, which is kind of odd to me, have any mid-band 5G at all deployed. They're actually don't, and they kind of, the problem there is they got caught in having to support, kind of the Microsoft almost issue is they got caught in supporting legacy technology. So they still have to support their old 3G networks and stuff like that. AT&T has announced that they will kill that 3G network, I think in 2022, February of 2022. And then that's a lot of the mid-band they can actually steal from that and then use that. And then there'll be some newer auctions from the FCC to actually allocate some more mid-band range to Verizon and AT&T at this point, probably. Obviously, if they win that auction, I think they lost the last auction to some strange company I've never heard of, but yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
That was okay. So that made me think about another thing, which I thought was, again, fascinating, was the foreign threat element to this. So, like, for example, one of the global, leaders in 5G infrastructure manufacturing is, I always want to say Hawaii, but it's the Chinese Huawei. That's it. Yeah, I want to say Hawaii, but it's not Hawaii. It's Huawei. Okay, and
you're thinking about Hawaii on your mind now. You can't get out of that, can you?
I can't because
same here.
I live in Chicago. That's why. But Huawei is one of the leading industry, 5G manufacturers in the world, but there's tremendous concern here, at least in the United States, that if we deploy their technology, it's some sort of direct feed to China from a data perspective, and that's a security risk, which kind of makes some sense, right? So, there is this challenge in that we want to be a 5G economy, but we're not creating the global leading 5G technology, and we can't bring it in because of the security threat. And I mean, honestly, in my lifetime, this is one of the first moments where the United States is not the industry leading producer of, cutting edge technology. It's the first time, it's always been that we've always been in front from a technology innovation perspective. And it feels like a very vulnerable moment for us that we're not, and you would think it'd be a great opportunity for somebody like, and I'm making it up, like a Cisco, like that, or some other one of our, leaders in that space, because we need it for our business and our industry. I just found that fascinating that, there's this, again, this tension between security and technology and innovation and economy. And we've always sort of taken it for granted, but this time, not really. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I actually agree with you. I think Huawei is, I think some of it is a little overblown. I think it's a little conspiracy theory a little bit, but there is legitimate security risks as well there. I think,
yeah, I agree.
A lot of Chinese companies do have direct ties, especially big ones, to the Chinese government. And if the Chinese government wanted to put some sort of backdoor, in that hardware and then shipped it over here, they could, access the entire 5G network if that hardware is in here. So I think there are some legitimate concerns there. I think some of the concerns might be a little overblown, but I think there are, because UK also announced that they won't be putting Huawei equipment in their 5G networks either recently. So it is, obviously a legitimate concern, but we have to think, we have to look at those and figure that out. And then there's Nokia, I think, is another major one for the 5G. So you got a lot of European, Chinese companies that are doing this. I feel like Ericsson's one of them too, but. You're right. There's no American company that's really making this 5G equipment that's going to, actually run the, so it might be in the back end of the 5G network, so the, switching stations and stuff like that. There'll be American equipment there, but for the actual 5G technology that's running the, towers and the millimeter waves, there's nothing there. And it is a strange place to be, that we are usually in the forefront of the stuff, at least designing the stuff here. It might be manufactured in another country. Mm-hmm. But we typically at least design and create these things in the United States, and now we're not doing that at all. They're being designed, manufactured, and everything in different countries.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment in time. I hope that we can remedy. What do you think, Bob?
No, I think it's good. I was looking up when you guys were talking about the midband. I guess that the nickname is Sub 6. For midband, so that's a good way to think about it, and probably is going to be the most affordable band for many of these folks to be, right? Mm-hmm. As we go through this 5G journey, I think that midband is where we're going to settle on for a lot of the things. But I think the interesting band is the next one, which gets up to 24. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. You're really starting to take technology in a different level once we get there. So when you look at the low, the mid, and basically the high, it's an incredible jump. And what I was mentioning earlier about 5G is just not one thing, and they're different levels. When you think about it like that, it really starts to me make sense that top band is going to make a difference in what we do a lot of the stuff, right? I was thinking, if Manhattan has driverless cars all over the place and 5G goes down for an hour, good Lord, it's chaos, right?
Think about it this way: like you're in the city where it's 5G, right? And then the car goes whatever the city line is, and it drops to midband, and all of a sudden that would be a bad outcome, right?
Yeah, you're right. Right.
Gotta switch off. So we're gonna have to start thinking. It's gonna be a different conversation. Like I think 5G will have sort of two flavors. There'll be a latency conversation, and then there'll be a download conversation, right? So like the download doesn't have as much implication as the latency one does, right? And I think that'll become another demarcation point in all of this. So many different things to think about. Really, it's really cool. Again, why I love this business. And the other gift of technology, it is what recreates our economy constantly. Like constantly there's a new economy because of some innovation, and this is the next one. This will be where tremendous investment goes, because that's where the opportunity will be. And that's for all those forward thinking, those future Elon Musks, this is where it is.
We're one step closer to the Jetsons and flying
Yep.
cars.
That's
One
right.
step closer, and that's what
What was the name of the dog? I forget. The Jetson
Elmo?
dog.
Elmo?
I don't remember.
We'll
No,
look that up for next time.
It's not Hawaii. It's not Hawaii.
No, it's
That's for
not.
the
All right.
that's for the Jetsons podcast, right?
That's right.
I love it.
That's for
Let's
the
do that.
Jetsons one. Yeah. How
Okay.
close are we to the Jetsons?
That could be one. I like it. Awesome. All right. Well, I see that we're at the top of the hour. Dylan, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it. Fascinating conversation. Really good stuff. And for all those listening, thank you for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.